Hello everyone, a very good morning to you. Welcome to the sunshine here at the Nürburgring for the next round of the FIA Formula 3 European Championship. Race 22 of the season. Here we go. With the backdrop of the Nürburgring Castle then, that looks down upon us, this fantastic 3.629 kilometre circuit. Scene of the next drama in the FIA Formula 3 European Championship. Qualifying done and dusted to set the grid for this particular race. And we'll be bringing you the grid in full in just a few moments' time. And there you can see the drivers, the cars, and everyone is assembled down there on the grid for the start of this 33-minute race, plus one lap, as is always the case with the Formula 3 European Championship. Beginning to reach the sharp end of the championship now with Nürburgring here. Then we have Red Bull Ring and Hockenheim to come. The man that put it on pole position, Robert Schwartzman, then the Prema Theodore racer, supported by SMP Racing. He will be going from P1 on the grid. You can see the focus on the face of Robert Schwartzman. And then alongside then Mick Schumacher, who will be going from P2 on the grid. Schwartzman and Schumacher, the only two drivers to put it into the 120.6s in a dampish qualifying session yesterday. Mick Schumacher, of course, also having driven this weekend a DTM car. Just by way of just testing it. Really, nothing more to read into it than that. Going from P3 on the grid is Daniel Ticktum, who leads the Drivers' Championship at the moment on 222 points. He is some 12 points ahead of Juri Vips, who's starting a little bit further down the order, it has to be said. So Dan Ticktum then going from P3 on the grid. Then it's Inem Ahmed, who will be alongside, going from P4. The driver that is currently P6 in the Drivers' Championship, Inem Ahmed, for the Hi-Tech Bullfrog GP team. A great character is Inem Ahmed, and he goes from P4 on the grid and will be hoping for good things from a second row start. Of course, we come here off the back of the races at Misano, which were somewhat weather challenged, it has to be said. And when we were last here at the Nürburgring last year, the winners were Lando Norris and Jake Hughes. Incidentally, of course, Lando Norris being announced as being in Formula 1 next year. Ralph Aron goes from P5 on the grid. A 120.9, the qualifying time for Ralph Aron, the Prema Theodore racer, who currently sits P5 in the Drivers' Championship as well. So Ralph Aron then going from P5 on the grid. He won the last race, of course, at Misano. Then the man that is doing the chasing in the Drivers' Championship at the moment, Marco Asma to his right-hand side there. Juri Vips, the Moto Park racer, goes from P6 on the grid. Has really shown some fantastic form over the mid section of the season. So Juri Vips will be hoping for good things from there. Then we see Alex Paulo in car number 39, another one of the Hi-Tech Bullfrog GP drivers. Alex Paulo then going from P7 on the grid. He sits in P8 in the Drivers' Championship. We get a thumbs up from Alex Paulo. And then we see Gian Daravala, the Carlin driver. So Gian Daravala P8 on the grid. Gian Daravala is so much further down in the Drivers' Championship than he would have hoped to be. He's going at the moment P10 on 117.5 points. Next alongside it is the car of Marino Sato, another Moto Park driver. Marino Sato gets a pat on the crash helmet then. Ahead of the start of this race, he goes from P9 on the grid. As the whistle blows to clear the grid, we are not far away from the formation lap getting underway for the, for the FIA Formula 3 European Championship. So Marino Sato, and alongside Marino Sato, Jonathan Aberdeen. Moto Park racer Jonathan Aberdeen then going from P10 on the grid. He's P12 in the Drivers' Championship points at the moment. Is Jonathan Aberdeen in car number 23. Took a couple of podiums for P3 at Silverstone when the Formula 3 European Championship visited the shores of the UK. Then we see Sasha Fenestras then, the Carlin driver, going from P11 on the grid. So Sasha Fenestras in the number 11 car goes from P11 on the grid and is P11 in the Drivers' Championships. It's all about the number 11 when it comes to that particular Carlin driver. Next up we see Nikita Troitsky then, driver of car number 16, another one of the Carlin drivers. Nikita Troitsky, Russian-based driver. Like Robert Schwartzman, of course. And we see the Van Amersfoort racer Artem Petrov. Van Amersfoort, and going from P13 on the grid for Artem Petrov, a 121.2 in, as I say, that somewhat weather-affected qualifying session yesterday. Of course, we have another qualifying session today, which will set the grid for races 2 and 3 over the course of this weekend. So a fantastic sight then, as we can see all the cars lined up on the grid, ready to do battle in this 33-minute plus 1 lap race from the Formula 3 European Championship. You're very welcome to join us. Glad you're here. Early morning at the Nürburgring with the sun shining. That's all pretty good. As you can see from the clock at the top of the screen, we have just over a minute before the formation lap gets underway. And there, the car of Mick Schumacher then. Driver of car number 4, who, again, he's another one of these drivers that really has come strong towards the end of the season. Has taken 3 wins. First of those was at Spa, then he backed that up with a win in Silverstone and a win in Misano as well. So it's been a non-stop winning streak, really, for Mick Schumacher. And he'll be hoping, of course, here at the Nürburgring to add another win into the book, if not 3. That would be ideal, and he's put himself in a very good position because, of course, the offset grid here at the Nürburgring means that Mick Schumacher is on the inside line going into turn number 1, albeit Robert Schwartzman starts a car length ahead. So just bear that in mind. Turn number 1 is always a bit of a pinch point. So the Prema Theodore team then, as you can see, the wet weather tyres always on the tyre trolleys just in case. But I have to say, here at Nürburgring this morning, the weather conditions are set fair and it all looks pretty good. There is our pole sitter, Robert Schwartzman, in car number 10. He has had some podiums this year, including one at Misano in the opening race at Misano last time out, but hasn't yet taken a win. So Robert Schwartzman will be hoping to put that to right. He's also taken a P2, of course, in Spa as the cars are released then on their formation lap and go roaring down towards that turn number 1. 11 turns here at the Nürburgring, 3.629 kilometers. 7 of them are right-handers, 4 of them are left-handers. A really challenging circuit where overtaking is not always easy. Coming out of the NGK chicane is one opportunity. Running into the Coca-Cola turn, we can see the cars going through turn 1 now, heading towards turn number 2, and then turn 3, 4 sequence, as you can see, that unfolds to the left of your screen at the moment. So here in the Eifel region then, beautiful backdrop, and there we follow the number 23 car of Jonathan Aberdeen, and there is our pole sitter, Robert Schwartzman then, weaving from side to side to generate some temperature into the tyres then ahead of the start of race number 1. Yeah, the number 8 car of Marcus Armstrong. Should mention that Marcus Armstrong has taken a grid drop because of an engine change following qualifying. Here's the grid in full for you. Robert Schwartzman, Mick Schumacher, front row. Then it's Dan Ticktum, Inem Ahmed. Ralph Aron, Juri Vips. Then it's Alex Paolo and Gian Daravala. Marino Sato. And behind Marino Sato is Jonathan Aberdeen, ahead of Sasha Fenestras, Nikita Troitsky, Artem Petrov, Ferdinand Habsburg. Then it's Guan Yu Zhu, Sophia Flörsch, Fabio Scherer, Marcus Armstrong, Ben Hingley, Kayvan Suri, Andres Amaya Vadyanathan, and Fernandez then rounding out the grid for this race. 3.629 kilometers then, 33 minutes plus 1 lap. Those 11 turns, 7 right-handers, 4 left-handers as the car from the side of our commentary studio we can see make their way around the Coca-Cola turn to where they are situated now on the start-finish straight. So they will park up millimetrically perfectly into their grid boxes ahead of the start of this 33-minute plus 1 lap race. Robert Schwartzman points his car slightly towards the inside there to try and protect that inside line as they get away from the start to ensure that he has that front position going in to turn number 1. We await all the cars to get into their grid boxes once they've done that, and there you can see René Rossin to the left-hand side of your screen there from Prema Theodore Racing, and Fritz van Amersfoort just hiding behind the back of the Van Amersfoort garage there as well. We're also in the Moto Park garage too. So we'll throw the lights to the top of the screen so that you can see the start sequence. Now we get the green flag from the marshal at the rear of the pack. We are ready to go racing. Stand by, hold on to your hats. FIA Formula 3 European Championship is about to get away here at the Nürburgring. It looked like a good start from Robert Schwartzman, but Mick Schumacher squeezes him out now. It's critical of turn 1. Who is going to be first through there? Schwartzman carrying a lot of speed, but Mick Schumacher got a blistering start, and that means that he puts himself in P1. There's a challenge going on for P3 as well. And there, as you can see, some 4, 5 cars, 6 cars involved in a skirmish through turn number 1. Our eyes, of course, were on the front of the pack, where this battle for P3 continues to rage. Dan Ticktum being caught out a bit right at the very, very start of the race. And Ralph Aron in car number 7 having gone through to pick up that P3 place. But the race is being led by Mick Schumacher, who got the most perfect start. The getaway from the start was ideal for him, and he was just able to put enough of the car alongside Robert Schwartzman to prevent Schwartzman having the inside line going into turn number 1. Safety car has been called for, not even 1 lap completed before the safety car comes out. That will be for the 6 cars involved through the turn number 1 section. And there you can see, who do we have out? Alex Palou is one of them. Also out is Gian Daruvala. Also too out is Marino Sato. And you can see the drivers walking away from their damaged cars, taking no further part in this opening race. It's a bit of a pinch point, it has to be said, turn number 1. And particularly right at the start of the race, well, inevitably we have seen some changes, and drivers bitterly disappointed that they'll be taking no further part in this race following that issue right at the start. As I say, our eyes were on the battle that was going on at the front for P1, and also the battle that was going on between Ralph Aron and Dan Ticktum for P3. So as the cars make their way through turn number 1 behind the safety car now, the recovery operation is underway. Pretty soon we'll get a replay of the start, and rather than focus right at the front, we'll take a look at what went on, which involved Gian Daruvala, Alex Palou, Marino Sato as well. And Juri Vips and Fabio Scherer are in the pit lane. There's Alex Palou and Gian Daruvala having a conversation there in the marshal post. Alex Palou to the very right-hand side of your picture. Gian Daruvala was the driver to the left-hand side. Looks like a retirement for the number 13 car of Fabio Scherer. So the order is, as you can see on the screen, and is this going to be it for Juri Vips as well? Because Juri Vips was chasing in the Drivers' Championship in P2, and a non-finish from Juri Vips is really going to dent his championship aspirations. So there you can see we've actually got to wheel off in that chicane as well. That's going to have to be recovered before we can return to racing. And there we can see just the discussions going on. There's obviously one of those tie rods broken at the back. So the 3 drivers there, Gian Daruvala, Marino Sato and Alex Palou, then all out of the race. It was just probably one of those incidents right at the start of the race with all the cars bunched together. So Schumacher then, having done a great job in terms of getting away from Robert Schwartzman right at the start. Well, he didn't even complete 1 lap before the safety car was called for. Let's take a replay here then. So we know what's happening right at the front. And so all the cars make their way into turn 1. Let's pick it up now. Gian Daruvala on the inside. Someone came sweeping across there. See the cars making their way through the debris. So Gian Daruvala touches, I think that was the car of Alex Palou. Here we'll be able to pick it up. Right. Well, Juri Vips, a really innocent bystander there, who gets sideswiped by the car of Alex Palou. I just think that the Alex Palou car by that time had been touched by Gian Daruvala. So that is really, really unfortunate for Juri Vips, who's P2 in the Drivers' Championship and has effectively been taken out of this race. From that angle and from that camera angle, and we restrict what we say because of that, because that's all we could see, it looked like Vips was an innocent bystander in that and just got sideswiped and taken out. So the conversation's going on with the Prema Feodor team with Rennie Ross in there, and there you can see the somewhat damaged number 39 car of Alex Palou from High Tech GP. His was the car that was turned around, but was it turned around as a consequence of perhaps being touched by Gian Daruvala? We reserve our judgment because from the replay that we saw, we weren't quite able to see. But what we do know is that we've lost Fabio Scherer, Juri Vips, Alex Palou, Gian Daruvala and Marino Sato. So the recovery operation continues then. And as soon as that is done, of course, we can go back to racing once again, not having completed one lap. So we've lost Fabio Scherer in the pit lane. We've also lost Juri Vips. So the cars of Gian Darovala and Alex Palou are under investigation. Now that really rather lends itself to my thought process that perhaps Alex Palou got a touch. But as I say, reserve judgment until we see what the stewards say. So Fabio Scherer out, Juri Vips out, Alex Palou out, and Gian Darovala out, as well as Marino Sato. So 5 cars down then when the safety car will eventually come back in after the recovery operation, which is pretty near complete now, to be honest. Just some absorbent fluid, as you can see. Some absorbent powder has gone down there to soak up the fluid on turn number 1. And really rather thinking that maybe they'll bring the safety car in at the conclusion of this lap. No indication of that on the screen yet, but I'm thinking that probably enough is being done in terms of recovery for that to happen. Clock continues to count down, of course, whilst we are behind the safety car, so it all counts in terms of the race duration, but clearly there is no racing going on because the cars are lined up behind the safety car. So Schumacher then with a great start, Schwartzman with a less good start. Ralph Aron also did a good job getting it into P3 ahead of Dan Ticktum, and yes, the safety car is going to come in this lap. So my prediction was right. Now, Guan Yu Zhu is up to P10 now. Guan Yu Zhu took a 5-place grid drop for causing a collision in race 3 at Misano, incidentally, and Marcus Armstrong is the real flyer as well, because he finds himself in P7. He took a 10-place grid drop because of an engine change after quali. So here we go then, and we'll go back to racing as the cars make their way out of the chicane now, and one bogs down there at the back of the chicane, and drivers having to take avoiding action, but Mick Schumacher gets the restart absolutely perfectly correct, and all of a sudden Robert Schwartzman's going to be under pressure from Ralph Aron as they head in towards the Coca-Cola turn. Schumacher has made haste his escape. Schwartzman goes to close that inside line. Ralph Aron has to go to the outside now and will try and get underneath the Robert Schwartzman car coming through the Coca-Cola turn. But Schwartzman makes the car wide enough to prevent that happening. So they go through turn 1, this time of asking, in real race conditions, rather more successfully than they did in the opening lap. So we have got a yellow flag between turn number 2 and 3. So somebody running wide and going off there potentially. But that remains there currently. You can see the yellow dash at the top of the screen. This is Ferdinand Habsburg then in battle there with the number 3 car of Sebastian Fernandez. And Fernandez runs wide, and by that time Ferdinand Habsburg had already gone through for Carlin Motorsport. Oh, and it's one of the Van Amersfoort drivers that is out there. And that was the cause of the yellow flag at... that was Sophia Flörsch. So, through the final turn come the race leaders then, and drivers getting in all sort of a muddle trying to come off that NGK chicane, which is a favourite place for overtaking. Schumacher leading by a full second over Robert Schwartzman, then Ralph Aron, who's been left behind by Schwartzman a little bit. You'll recall at the restart, Ralph Aron was desperately trying to get to the inside and try and find his way past Robert Schwartzman, but it wasn't to be. And now Dan Ticktum will be thinking about, he's only 6/10 behind Ralph Aron in P4, be trying to wrestle back that P3 place that he lost out on earlier on. So Schumacher goes through and maintains that lead with a full second over Robert Schwartzman. Then it's Ralph Aron in P3. Then it's Dan Ticktum. Inem Ahmed is the next in. And then Artem Petrov, who incidentally, Artem Petrov is under investigation for a jump start. So Artem Petrov under investigation for a jump start. Just bank that there. He's currently running in that P6 place. Now, if they judge that he has had a jump start, then he'll get a drive-through penalty potentially for that, and that'll take him out of that P6 place at the moment, Artem Petrov. So the incident right at the start of the race is going to be looked at by the stewards at the end of the race. So there'll be no decisions made during the course of the race. It will be after the race. So Artem Petrov here, then running in P6 at the moment, the car that is under investigation for a potential jump start. Race leader, Mick Schumacher, P2, Robert Schwartzman. All of a sudden now, Dan Ticktum is right on the back of Ralph Aron for that P3 place as their cars make their way through turn number 1 once again. We've got 22 minutes plus 1 lap of race action to come from the Formula 3 European Championship. The first of 3 races here at the Nürburgring across the course of this weekend. It's being played out in the sunshine. Now, just something else to make note of is that last time around, Mick Schumacher lost a couple of tenths in comparison to the speed of Robert Schwartzman. Schwartzman was quicker, and Schwartzman has just done a very quick first sector as well. So is the fight back from the Russian underway now for that potential race lead, which is being held at the moment by Mick Schumacher. Incidentally, Ferdinand Habsburg has just come into the pit lane. Now, we've just seen him make good overtake, haven't we? And Ferdinand Habsburg is in the pit lane. There we are. So the Carlin driver, Ferdinand Habsburg, and you can see why. The rear tyre is off the rim. So Ferdinand Habsburg having to come in then, and the Carlin engineers, as you can see, don't appear to be in a terrible hurry to replace that. So whether something else is broken on the Ferdinand Habsburg car, and that means it will be a race retirement for the very tall Formula 3 driver, Ferdinand Habsburg. What a shame. So you run downhill from the start-finish straight into turn number 1, and you can't see that from this particular camera angle, but you can see it from the last one that we had. So Mick Schumacher then just quietly being caught now by Robert Schwartzman, who's taken another couple of tenths out of Mick Schumacher's time. Those two have broken away a bit from the Aron, Ticktum, Ahmed and Petrov battle. So there you can see graphic confirmation of what I've been saying with regards to Robert Schwartzman getting ever closer to Mick Schumacher, despite the completely different colour schemes. They both run for the same Prema Theodore team. Robert Schwartzman sets the fastest lap then, a 1:22.102, as the chase is on to the race leader, Mick Schumacher, who, as I mentioned in the pre-programme, has already tested a DTM car this weekend, purely for fun. There's nothing in it, I can assure you, but he drove one of the Mercedes DTM cars. I could see just before he went out in the car, advice was given by Pascal Wehrlein. Now, interestingly, the safety car restart is being looked at now because there are potential problems for car number 1, Guan Yu Zhu, car number 25, Sophia Flörsch, which is academic because I'm pretty sure Sophia Flörsch is out of the race, and also for car number 77, which is Ben Hingley. So, Schwartzman takes another couple of tenths out of Mick Schumacher. And Ticktum finds his way past Ralph Aron. And now Ralph Aron is going to lose out to Inem Ahmed as well. As Ahmed goes through, Aron will try and come back at him now. So just in the space of a few metres of tarmac, a number of overtakes. So Ticktum, who'd been hounding Ralph Aron, does get past him, and so too does Inem Ahmed. And next is Artem Petrov in that little queue of cars trying to get past that number 7 car, which is centre screen right now. So there is Dan Ticktum. You can see the pace he has got, and also Inem Ahmed has got, in comparison to the Ralph Aron car. The gap between Schwartzman and Schumacher, P2 and P1, is down to 4 tenths as they run through the NGK chicane. And just with the sheer pace that Dan Ticktum has got, if he can get onto the back of those two, that's going to make for a three-way fight for the race lead, which will be very, very interesting. Now, bear in mind, Dan Ticktum is P1 in the Drivers' Championship at the moment. So, Aron tries to defend. Ticktum, really brave, just holds onto the car and has the momentum. And that was a brilliant overtake from Dan Ticktum. Came from a long way back into turn number 1. Was really brave. Went to the runoff area, but still held onto the car, and a very, very good overtake. Now, what we were mentioning a few moments ago about the safety car restart, that's going to be investigated after the race, so nothing is going to concern us now during the course of this race. As we watch Dan Ticktum, who gets himself back for that P3 place that Ralph Aron took from him right at the start of the race. Now, car number 12, Artem Petrov, who's also in this battle with Ralph Aron, has got a drive-through penalty for a jump start at the start of the race. That wasn't for the, although ignore that, which said car number 11, Fenestras, that's not right. Ignore the graphics, it is car number 12, Artem Petrov, getting a drive-through penalty. There it is, corrected. And that is for a jump start. We can only assume that was at the original race start. So that will be a real disappointment for Artem Petrov, who'd raced really well and moved up a number of places. Whether he was, of course, advantaged by that jump start is another question. But his current P6 position is gone now. Schumacher has responded a little bit to the pace of Robert Schwartzman and increased the gap to some 7/10. So it is Schumacher, Schwartzman, Ticktum, Ahmed, Aron, Petrov, who you can ignore because Marcus Armstrong will take up that P6 place when Petrov comes in for that drive-through penalty. Then it will be Zhu, Hingley, Kevin Andres, and Jonathan Aberdeen will round out the top 10 points-paying positions. So, big cat and mouse between Schumacher and Schwartzman. And I think it will liven up if Ticktum can get on terms with them. Just taking a look at the lap time. So Ticktum and Schumacher are in the 1:21.8. So Ticktum has got some pace. But it's whether there's enough of the race left. We've got 16 minutes plus 1 lap. Here's Schumacher into the NGK chicane now. Brakes, turns in. Takes a bit of the curb coming out. Schwartzman takes a bit more of the curb in his quest to get alongside and up close enough to be able to make a move. Nothing like close enough yet. Inem Ahmed showing good pace as well. In comes Artem Petrov then for the drive-through penalty. So see the drive-through penalty being taken by Artem Petrov. That takes him out of that P6 position, which is now occupied, as I indicated, by Marcus Armstrong, and also moves up Guan Yu Zhu, Ben Hingley, Keivan Suri Andres, and Jonathan Aberdeen, who rounds out the final points-paying position. So Mick Schumacher then sets the fastest lap as he responds to the challenge from Robert Schwartzman. A 1:21.716 from Mick Schumacher. You can see Schwartzman within 7/10 of the number 4 car ahead. Of course, Dan Ticktum is the one that we are keeping our eyes on as well. He's a further 1.5 down at the moment. But they go through the kink, which is turn number 8. Absolutely flat before heavy braking for this NGK chicane. Turning now, Schumacher again, rumbling across the curbs. Schwartzman with a cleaner line through there this time. And Dan Ticktum and Inem Ahmed on the back of that P1 and P2 places, running in P3 and P4 at the moment, desperately trying to get involved in the mix as well. So Schumacher, Schwartzman, Ticktum, Ahmed, Aron. Then it's Armstrong, Zhu, and Ben Hingley. Now, of course, we saw the retirement earlier on of Ferdinand Habsburg, sadly. And this is why. So Ferdinand Habsburg making a connection with the number 3 car of Sebastian Fernandez. We saw that, and what it did for the left-hand rear of Ferdinand Habsburg's car, hence the need for Ferdinand Habsburg to retire. Great shame, and there he is in discussions then. And the Ferdinand Habsburg car with the wet weather tyre, as you can see, just placed on there to keep the car on all 4 wheels in the pit lane. Sadly, no further race action in this race for Ferdinand Habsburg. So, back to where we're at then, and it is Mick Schumacher, who is leading by 0.8 over Robert Schwartzman. So once again, they head through turn number 8, heading towards turn number 9, which is this NGK chicane. For my money, Ticktum is getting a bit closer. That's anecdotal only. Check on the timing screen. Yes, I think he is. It's 1.2 seconds down on Robert Schwartzman now. So he has got a bit closer. So Schumacher, 9/10 ahead of Schwartzman. Then it's a second between Schwartzman and Dan Ticktum. Then it's Inem Ahmed, Ralph Aron, Marcus Armstrong, Guan Yu Zhu, and Ben Hingley rounding out the top 8 as the lead cars make their way through at turn number 1. So just on 12.5 minutes plus 1 lap of the race remaining for this opening race of the 3 that we'll have here at the Nürburgring this weekend in the Formula 3 European Championship. The race being led from Mick Schumacher, who of course started P2 on the grid but did a fantastic job right at the start and relegated Robert Schwartzman to P2 long before the safety car was called for that instant right at the start, which involved Paolo and Daruvala and of other cars as well, including Jury Vips. So the championship prediction, if it stays this way, Daniel Ticktum will extend his lead to 237 points, and then jumping Jury Vips by 1 point will be Mick Schumacher, who will find himself P2 in the Drivers' Championship. It really has come good towards the end of the season for Mick Schumacher, who's put some wins in. That's a super slow-mo of him hard at work in the Prema Theodore car, number 4 then. Currently leading this race by a full second over Robert Schwartzman. Mick Schumacher then, the race leader. Will this be win number 4 in the season? Well, we are 11.5 minutes plus a lap away from that being celebrated, should it be the case. So Schumacher looking pretty comfortable at the moment, and whatever Schwartzman can throw at him, Mick Schumacher seems able to respond. The times have seesawed a bit between P1 and P2, but we are talking about only tenths. But Dan Ticktum is within 8/10 of Robert Schwartzman now. So, of course, what would really, not that Schumacher is being troubled in any way at all at the moment by Robert Schwartzman, but all of a sudden, Robert Schwartzman is having to think about, he can see his rearview mirrors, the Dan Ticktum car, so he knows that Ticktum is getting closer. It's playing into the hands of Mick Schumacher because Schwartzman is going to have to be thinking about defending that P2 position from this man, Dan Ticktum, in car number 27, then the Drivers' Championship leader at the moment, who is currently running in P3, but can probably taste the opportunity of P2. So through the gravel then you can see that camera angle of Mick Schumacher's car, then Robert Schwartzman, then Dan Ticktum, who quietly has gone about getting on terms and isn't going to be this lap, but maybe next lap Ticktum will be close enough to have a bit of a go going into turn number 1. Let's see. So this is where the fight is going to be. I think it's going to be over this P2 place, because the more P2 and P3 drivers are battling themselves, it's just playing into the hands of Mick Schumacher, who has put a further 3/10 of comfort margin between himself and Robert Schwartzman. Schwartzman is distracted now by thinking about defending from Daniel Ticktum. So the Red Bull liveried number 27 car then, of course, lost out right at the start of the race, but since then has come very, very good, having passed Ralph Aron, who now finds himself down there in that P5 position. The order is Schumacher, Schwartzman, Ticktum. Then it's Inem Ahmed. Good showing from Inem Ahmed, Ralph Aron, Marcus Armstrong, Guan Yu Zhu, Ben Hingley, and Jonathan Aberdeen and Kevin Suri Andres then rounding out the top 10. I don't think that Ticktum is going to be close enough this time going into turn number 1 as they round the Coca-Cola turn, the final turn number 11 here at the Nürburgring, as the cars make their way downhill now as they cross the timing line just in front of our commentary position. You begin running downhill, and there, as you can see, Ticktum isn't really close enough. Schwartzman doing a good job in terms of making sure there is enough of a margin between himself and Dan Ticktum at the moment to protect that P2 place. Drivers P1 and P2, and then in P3 the Moto Park driver Daniel Ticktum. So there is the 27 car. Dan Ticktum. And there you can see the cars are all gapped almost evenly. As Schwartzman responds just a little bit and gets a little bit closer. We're talking about a tenth closer to Mick Schumacher. Schumacher, Schwartzman, Ticktum, Ahmed, Aron, Armstrong. The rest of them all gapped out fairly evenly. So I think right in the closing stages of this race, and we're into the final 7.5 minutes, whether Ticktum is going to be able to get close enough to Robert Schwartzman. We could do with is for Schwartzman to make a small error, but in truth, Schwartzman hasn't looked, apart from his start not being brilliant, Mick Schumacher getting the better start. Schwartzman hasn't really put a wheel wrong for the entire duration of the race. And it's probably going to take that for Ticktum to get on terms with him. He's closed the gap down, and he is but 8 tenths behind Robert Schwartzman, but it's all very well being 8 tenths down. You've got to get even closer, and not only have you got to get closer, you've got to try and find a way past as well, and that, of course, is not easy. So Schumacher just stretching his legs out a bit because it had come down to 9 tenths between P1 and P2. So as they head up towards the NGK chicane now, across the timing line there for Sector 2, into the NGK chicane they go. Schwartzman then again taking quite a bit of curve out of the NGK chicane, which, although you carry the momentum over the curves, it just unsettles the car a little bit, and your exit out of the NGK chicane is perhaps not as smooth as you would like it to be. So 8 tenths then as they cross the timing line between Schumacher and Schwartzman. 7 tenths between Schwartzman and Ticktum, and then Inem Ahmed is a full 4 seconds behind. So Ahmed, I don't think is going to be trouble in the top 3. It's whether within the space of 6 minutes plus 1 lap, whether Ticktum can get close enough to Robert Schwartzman to have a go. Of course, it would make his Drivers' Championship position even greater in terms of the margin over the P2 driver in the Drivers' Championship, which it's most likely going to be Mick Schumacher that moves into that P2 position in the Drivers' Championship, with the non-finish from Juri Vips, of course, really hurting his championship aspirations going into this race. He was P2, a mere 12 points behind Daniel Ticktum, but he was very much an innocent bystander in that opening lap situation in turn number 1, and got nerfed out of the race, sadly. So you can see there a real graphic indication of just how far ahead these 3 drivers are over Inem Ahmed, who's in that P4 position, who in turn is a full 2.5 seconds ahead of Ralph Aron, who is at P5. So we're into the final 5 minutes plus 1 lap. Schwartzman having done a good job in terms of defending against the hard-charging Dan Ticktum, and Ticktum hasn't really found the little extra that he needs to really challenge Schwartzman. Although, to be fair, he is wily and he's clever, and is he thinking, I'm going to wait right until the end of the race and catch him unawares and really go for it right at the end. Let's hope so, because all of a sudden all 3 of them close up a little bit more, because the gap between Schumacher and Schwartzman now is down to 6 tenths, and it's about the same between Schwartzman and Dan Ticktum. So, like any good story, this could have a really thrilling end, because all 3 of them are very, very close together, which is kind of just what we would like it to be. So there is our race leader, Mick Schumacher. 4 tenths now between himself and Robert Schwartzman. So as they head around turn number 8 now, and head towards that chicane once again. Into the chicane they go. And it's the exit from this chicane which can help you set up an overtake going into turn number 1. I appreciate you have another turn to do before you get there, but it's just the momentum you carry is just sufficient for that to be really useful in terms of setting up an overtake going into this turn number 1. Don't think any of the drivers are close enough to be able to do so. Ticktum again coming from a long way back, really closing on Robert Schwartzman. So these 3 then really exciting now towards the end of this race. And this in replay then. This is Sophia Flörsch then out of the race in the Van Amersfoort car, the lady racer that joined us, of course, midway through the season. In fact, made her debut in the Formula 3 European Championship. I think it was at the Zandvoort circuit. But out of the race here. So here are the top three then. Schumacher leading Robert Schwartzman, leading Dan Ticktum. So into the NGK chicane again. Ticktum this time, I think, is closer to Robert Schwartzman. What can he find now off the back of the chicane? He is closer than he's been to Schwartzman. And if he comes from as far back as he did last time around going into the turn one, he might be able to have a go now. Schwartzman is able to respond with a good exit from the Coca-Cola turn. I don't think Ticktum is quite close enough. He'll take a look at the inside potentially. Just shows his face a little bit as they head into turn number one, preferring to carry the momentum. So into turn number two they go. The fight is on for P2 more than P1 in my opinion. And it is Dan Ticktum that is taking this fight to Robert Schwartzman. We've got just over a minute and a half plus one lap of this race. So there is Schumacher leading from Robert Schwartzman, who is within 5 tenths, but it's 4 tenths between Schwartzman and Ticktum. So P1, P2 and P3. So 5 tenths then, P1 to P2, and then you can see visibly closer between P2 and P3. So what can Dan Ticktum do now? Needs to carry everything he can going into this chicane. And the exit of this chicane, ever critical with regards to setting up a perfect. He runs a bit wide there. That probably compromised what he would have liked to have done going into turn number one. And it is the exit of that chicane rather than the Coca-Cola turn, which helps set you up for an overtake going into turn number one, which is where the drivers are heading now. Mick Schumacher then leading the race. Then it is Robert Schwartzman. There you can see Dan Ticktum. He can come from a long way back, but the gap between himself and Robert Schwartzman is just too great. So we have the remainder of this lap, plus one more. This fight to the finish then in the first race of 3 in the Formula 3 European Championship here at Nürburgring. So Schumacher then seemingly in complete control. Schwartzman now under a bigger threat from Dan Ticktum. Schwartzman has defended for lap after lap after lap from Dan Ticktum. You can see Ticktum taking liberties almost in terms of trying to get some momentum to get onto the back of that Prema car that is ahead of him, supported by SMP Racing, the Russian driver who is running in P2. Robert Schwartzman then as they make their way through turn 8 and up towards the chicane once again. Ticktum closes in, king of the late breakers then, right onto the gearbox almost of Robert Schwartzman. And again, the exit from Schwartzman is just marginally better than the exit of Ticktum. So around the Coca-Cola turn, and as they cross the timing line this time, it will be for the final lap. 1 lap to do. Schumacher leading. Schwartzman, here comes Ticktum. What can he do now? He looks to the inside. He's not close enough, truthfully. Now, I've said earlier on in this race, Ticktum is quite wise. He knows that banking points for P3 will be better than risking everything and risking a DNF in terms of his challenge on Schwartzman. If the overtake is there, he's going to go for it because he's a racer. But he also knows that his position in the Drivers' Championship will be heightened, will be strengthened by a P3 result. And therefore driving very much with his head. That's where he takes it. He runs onto the Astro just to try and get a little bit more momentum. Really good to watch through that turn number 6, 7 sequence. Ticktum at work. Down behind the paddock now. NGK chicane beckons. He again is right on the gearbox. Schwartzman looks in the rearview mirrors to see where he is. Really hard to get by through the chicane, but it's not impossible around the Coca-Cola turn if Ticktum can get to the inside, but he's not able to do so. So as they head towards the checkered flag, then valiant effort from Dan Ticktum, but Schumacher wins his 4th race of the season. Robert Schwartzman takes P2 and Dan Ticktum will take P3 with Inem Ahmed a good P4. P5 goes the way of Ralph Aron. Then it will be Marcus Armstrong for P6. Guan Yu Zhu P7. Jonathan Aberdeen should cross the line for P8 ahead of Ben Hingley taking P9. And a good result for Keivan Suriandres, who locks out the points-paying positions by taking P10. Wow, what a race. Towards the end of the race, Sabina Kem there. Schumacher's manager then will be delighted with his performance. He did it all right at the very, very start of the race. Well, he banks win number 4 in his Formula 3 European Championship season. And of course, with a non-finish from Juri Vips, finds himself P2 in the Drivers' Championship now. So, congratulations then from the Prema Theodore team. So, plenty going on in that race, that's for sure, of course, punctuated by that early safety car. Here we go then, super slow-mo in replay of Mick Schumacher then heading towards the checkered flag. As he rounded that Coca-Cola turn, Ticktum throwing everything bar the kitchen sink out of the car to try and get on terms, but it was not enough. Mick Schumacher was always going to take the win ahead of Robert Schwartzman, who was under threat from Dan Ticktum. But in the end, Schumacher was the one that sealed the deal and took the victory. And that is a super shot of the checkered flag on the number 4 car. And there, the congratulations within the Prema team. Here's confirmation of the result then, with Mick Schumacher taking the win from Robert Schwartzman, Daniel Ticktum. Then it was Inem Ahmed, Ralph Aron, Marcus Armstrong, Guan Yu Zhu, Jonathan Aberdeen, Ben Hingley, and Keivan Suriandres for Van Amersfoort Racing, taking the final points-paying position. Sadly, we lost Ferdinand Habsburg, Sophia Flörsch, Fabio Scherer, Juri Vips, Alex Paulo, and of course also Gian Taravala and Marino Sato. So the backdrop of the Nürburgring paddock in the Drivers' Championship then. Daniel Ticktum extends his margin at the top on 237 points now. Mick Schumacher jumps by 1 point, Juri Vips, to find himself P2 in the Drivers' Championship. And then P3 is Juri Vips, who of course did not finish that race. In fact, he didn't even complete a lap. Marcus Armstrong P4 in the Drivers' Championship now. So, Mick Schumacher then, within sight, potentially, of the Drivers' Championship. As Thomas Sierra there, the official Formula 3 photographer, will get a great shot of Schumacher jumping out of his car in Parc Fermé. And he stands atop the car and celebrates! 4th win in the Formula 3 European Championship for Mick Schumacher. So, there to the left of your picture is Rennie Rossin. He's congratulated by Sabina Kem, and there is Rennie Rossin congratulating Mick Schumacher. Dan Ticktum there. Drivers being weighed, of course, before heading up to the podium. It's Marcus Armstrong, you can see to the very left of the picture there. Mick Schumacher there offering congratulations. Try and listen in sometimes to the conversations that are going on. Often in German, often in Italian as well. So there, the checkered flag once again. And a replay of Mick Schumacher then in Parc Fermé, celebrating his fourth Formula 3 European Championship win. Did all the hard work right at the start of the race, of course, with that overtake on Robert Schwartzman. So the drivers will be heading off up to the podium. Super slow-mos to the top three then. P3, Dan Ticktum. P2 for Robert Schwartzman, but the race winner, Mick Schumacher. So the drivers in the assembly area then, ahead of the podium. Hopefully we'll be able to bring you the podium in full. What a race that was. Robert Schwartzman, you can see with the blue overalls, the ITEC Bullfrog GP Enim Ahmed, you can see there. Here comes Marcus Armstrong into the picture as well, as we go back down to the pit lane then. So drivers shortly will be called out onto the podium for the podium celebrations, of course. And there is Mick Schumacher being congratulated by all and sundry, of course. Again, trying to listen into some of the key conversations that are going on. Okay, we're on with the podium, I think. Peter Reichardt then, who will be the podium presenter, who will get the drivers out onto the podium. Sure enough, he sparks into voice. And there is the podium awaiting us then. There is Schumacher then. He will go to the top step of the podium.
Mario Garzulo, ebenfalls bitte auf Position 2 aus Russland, Robert Schwartzman und die 3 aus
Robert Schwartzman next out then, and he will of course take step 2 on the podium. And then Dan Ticktum, who banks very critical points and secures his position at the top of the Drivers' Championship. Here comes the national anthem. So the anthem plays out then, and Schumacher celebrates on the top step of the podium once again. Is about to be presented with his trophy for what will be his 4th win in the FIA Formula 3 European Championship. So there, the trophy is presented, and he holds it aloft. Well done, Mick Schumacher. Prema Theodore receive yet another trophy for their magnificent trophy cabinet, it has to be said, back in Italy. Up next, Robert Schwartzman receives his trophy. Another P2. The win so far has escaped him. who knows? We still have another 8 races. ATS making the trophy presentation to Dan Ticktum. So there we have it then, the podium, and everyone gets together for the photographs, but Mick Schumacher seals another win in the FIA Formula 3 European Championship and finds himself P2 now in the drivers' points. He's flanked by Robert Schwartzman and Daniel Ticktum, taking P2 and P3 respectively. Stand by, more quali action to come from Formula 3 ahead of races 2 and 3 tomorrow. Bye-bye for now.